quite implemental, that have been instrumental in this, and we'll try to bring them if we can. Feel free though throughout this whole presentation to get some more food, get things to drink, and really enjoy what you can. We've definitely taxed this room out. I think we first thought about possibly closing the street and having some stuff outside, but then the weather and 85 degrees, it sounded like it wasn't going to be real pleasant. But I did want to thank a few people, if I can, before we get started. My name is Greg Marston. I'm the interim president, the board president for the Polk County Historical Society. And if you're not aware of how this works, the county owns this museum. This is the 1899 courthouse. And through an effort, a community effort, but I think really behind one person, Willis Erickson, brought this museum to fruition and saved it. There was a pretty solid thought at the time, back in the mid-70s, to tear this building down. And I think that it's important we realize that there were some people that really had a great grand vision for this and helped save it. But I'm not sure. I'm going to start with a few people here that I'd like to point out. Our current or past Historical Society board members, if you could raise your hand or stand up. There's Carla. Patricia's here somewhere, and Lois. There's Patricia, and there's Warren Nelson behind. Here's Patricia. Ruth Mugerauer. A few others, and then Sue Durkop is upstairs. I believe we've got a few others as well. I want to point them out because they've really just done yeoman's duty here in the last weeks and months, and in many cases years, to bring this whole event to fruition, but also to bring the bones back to this lovely spot. Also want to point out Marlon Hawley. Marlon is visiting us. Raise your hand here. His wife Amy right next to him, and his daughter Rachel right here, who is also helping out. They came up from Madison. And Marlon, as you'll hear, I'll have him explain a little bit about what his background is, but he has been absolutely key to making this happen. And it's through his queries and through his research as well that this really did come to be. Laura Halverson Monahan is right next to him. All right, and she is also from Madison. She is a curator at the State Museum and assisted dramatically with this display, and she'll also say a few words. Her husband Mike here as well came up and helped out, and we appreciate them coming up as well. Also, we'd like to point out Senator Harsdorf is here. Sheila, thanks for coming out, and you'll hear there's a very critical reason that she is here, and I want you to notice that as well. Any other county board members? I know we've got County Board Chairman William Johnson here. We've got Warren Nelson, who's also on the county board. Are there other board members that I may have missed anywhere? If not, feel free. Maybe don't be afraid to, at least have some food. You don't have to raise your hand. But also the Polk County Property Committee. There's some folks we'd like to thank there as well who work very well with the county and help maintain this amazing building. A few other people would like to thank as well. If you didn't notice, we had musicians. We had a harpist down here. We had Denise Johnson. I want to thank her for helping out. We had Al Durkop, where did he go? Oh, he's back. All right, he's upstairs playing piano. We appreciate that as well. Also, Itons for providing food here as well from over in Chisago City and Chisago County, and you'll also hear they were critical as well in helping us out. That's where they have the big bison as well. Russ Hansen for bringing some marl. If you haven't seen up at the exhibit, there's actual marl up there. I want to thank a few others. Let's make some introductions too. We have two new employees. We have Sandra Stevermer. You want to raise your hand? She is our new Historical Society director in the last 6 weeks, a month. And then next to her is Charity Shard. Charity, if you want to raise your hand. She is our new curator here at the museum. And they have both just done amazing work here, and we really are just so lucky to have them and to have them involved and help us out. A few others, Candace, I forgot Candace's last name. Elliott. Candace Elliott from also down in Madison helped with that display and did those amazing posters and helped out to make that look as professional. Not that I couldn't have done that with a few Sharpies. I couldn't have done that with a few Sharpies, that's true. A few other people that could not be here. Chris Widga, who was very instrumental as well in the beginnings of this. Matt G. Hill, who was an Iowa State professor who helped with the research as well, and was one of those also very instrumental in bringing this to light as well. Let's get to William Johnson here if we could to just, can you just come in and just just
I'll just stay back here. I'm pretty long. I'd just like to thank everybody and just recognize that the county certainly knows the importance of having museums in the county, and we really thank the people who are involved with volunteering and being on boards for museums, because they bring visitors here. And visitors to Polk County are very important to our economy. So we really appreciate that, and I'll just leave you with one. I've gotten a lot of mileage out of this in a few spots, and you'll talk a bit later about it and tell us how old the bison bones actually are. That was kind of the big secret, I guess, for the day. But it was my comment before the county board meeting that if they were only 200 years old, we could have called it the bicentennial. Get it?
That was worth it. Thank you. Also, Carla, I don't think I recognize you. Carla is also one of our board members here as well, and I sit behind. Another people, I just wanted to mention a few things, maybe on where this started. And the reason I brought up Russ Hansen as well, he just pointed out something that was a half hour ago. This is the guy who brought the marl. And in doing some research as well for 4-H and for the ag department, found a definitive connection, I think, between some of that early, some of the things they were trying to do to reforest, or after deforestation of Polk County. And there were some things they had to do to bring alfalfa in. And one of those was to find marl. If you haven't seen what marl is, it's kind of a calcium carbonate. It's what they used to kind of rectify the soil after a lot of pine trees were here, and the pH was wrong. But anyways, so finding kind of a connection to that, because it's the 100-year anniversary of 4-H, or of the ag department. So that'll be kind of one of the things that'll be at the Polk County Fair. But I just thought that was kind of neat as well, that there was a connection going back even long before they were discovered. But I just wanted to tell you a real thing here before Warren Nelson is going to be coming up, and I wanted Warren to say a few things as well. But I've got a story after about why this happened, and I think it's pretty interesting as well. But one of the premier people that could not be here is Rosalie Kittleson. And Rosalie's husband, Daryl, who passed away about 2.5 years ago, was instrumental in making this happen. And Rosalie and Daryl, of course, if you're not aware, were huge advocates of the museum and worked very hard and tirelessly as well over the years. And one of the nice things we have is we have 3 generations of Kittlesons here. His daughter Ginger, right here, her son Clayton, right here, and his daughter, and I forgot your name. Kaylee. So 3 generations of Kittlesons here representing. We did pretty good. We couldn't get Rosalie or Daryl, but we got that. But I think it also shows how critical, and I think in talking with Ginger, how important it really was to Daryl, this facility and this project. It was really just instrumental. I mean, he was one of those people that something would happen and he would call, and I worked for the newspaper as well, but I was on the board, and he would call and he'd say, "Marston, I got a project for you." And that's how, and he always knew, it's like, oh, you better start taking notes. And I'm like, Daryl, I got to put you on speakerphone so I can talk, so I can write. No, okay, I'll wait. And it was just hilarious. And I was actually, I have a little portable recorder. And it's one of those things where it's got 250 hours of things you record on there. And I saved one file that was one of the original files from October 20th, 2010, where Daryl, myself, Rosalie were on a conference call with Marlin about how did this happen, about how to get about this. How do we get the bones back? Because they were over in Minnesota. And it was really interesting, and one of the things that Daryl ended off with is, well, we're just going to have to make it happen. And that was the kind of thing he would just, just going to have to make it happen. So, anyways, Rosalie is right now at the Grand Canyon, so she could not be here, and today would have been their anniversary. Do you know how many years?
35 years.
35th anniversary today, so she could not be here. But let's get Warren Nelson. Warren Nelson is the next board president here, and I'd like him to say a few words as well, because he's been instrumental. Whoop. And I come on up, Warren.
Let's get started back here too, and thank everyone for showing up. We're looking for the support of the local residents, and we're certainly getting it based on what I see here today. And we have great directors. We're going to be making big changes with the museum. We're going after some grants. If any of you have some extra money that you want to, we'll name a room after you. Anyway, thank you very much for coming.
This would be probably a good point to recognize somebody else who was here, Eldred Anderson, who was instrumental in helping us find where these bones were originally found. And this was back, I want to say it was 2011, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Myself, Daryl, Marlin, Matt Hill, Dan Mosé, Chief Dan Mosé, and Eldred and I took a trip through probably the most mosquito-infested part of Polk County, and we didn't have hatchets. And it was funny because I wrote a story on it later, and I said, you know, I really felt like as close to Indiana Jones as you'll ever find, you know. But unlike, you know, really exotic tribes of people trying to kill me, it was little mosquitoes that were at me. So I wasn't worthy of wearing an Indiana Jones hat. But Eldred has kind of a neat story. Can you maybe just give us 5 minutes, because your connection to the Marl pit was kind of interesting, wasn't it? You were a kid.
My grandpa was foreman down there. They had a little dugout in the side of the bank with a roof on it. And one of my uncles was a truck driver, dump truck, and hauled the Marl around. And otherwise, then when we only lived about a half a mile from the Marl pit, my grandma would always make cake and pie and stuff and take over there for the guys that worked there. It was interesting.
And you would actually deliver to them, right? Is that what I understand? You would deliver, yeah.
We carried the stuff over there, and yeah, they're all friendly people.
How old were you about then? Do you remember?
9 or 10, 11, must have been.
Do you remember when this happened? Do you remember when they found those bones?
I was there, but I don't, because my uncle Hans, he's the one who found a lot of the bones. He took them to Minnesota though. And so, yeah, he hauled Marl pit, or the Marl too, but he tipped over there by neighbors a little ways away from there once. It was a deep ditch.
Okay. I thought that was a word for something else, but that's...
It could have been.
So, well, Eldred, we really appreciate your coming down and all the help you've been in really going back and finding not only where this place was, but also kind of filling in a lot of the blanks and a lot of the story, a lot of the pieces of the story of the puzzle.
Remember we found bones on the way down? There was a dead deer though.
That's right. They weren't quite as old. Excellent. And we should probably mention as well that, I mean, you've kind of stayed involved in this along the way. I know Marlon's stayed in contact with you as well. It's interesting.
Yep.
Have you, I mean, in your time, did you ever think that delivering those sandwiches would maybe be important?
Yes, I did.
Well, we appreciate you coming out today as well, and I think if we can give Eldred a big round of applause. I think he was this might be a good time to bring up Marlon and Laura. Laura, you want to go first? You maybe, or did you want to talk a little bit about what it takes to kind of make a display like this? Because it's been...
Well, first I want to say that we are really happy to be able to partner with the Polk County Historical Society, because we have a large collection at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, but we don't have exhibit space. So we are happy to be able to bring these bones back here and make them available so that people can see them and appreciate them where they originally were found. So we're happy to do that. The exhibit took, maybe a year of work, working with some of the manuscripts that Marlon and others had worked on. And then Candace, who couldn't be here, did a lot of the graphics on the computer, and there were many iterations of all of the panels, and we worked through everything and then set up a mock display of the case that's currently up there at the museum in Madison, and then we transported everything down here last October and put everything in and rearranged things and put labels in, and so a lot of work goes into it, even though it's not a huge space. There's a lot more time and background that goes into developing exhibits. So, and I know Candace was really proud of the exhibit that turned out up there, and she was hoping that you all enjoyed it too. So
Absolutely, very good.
Laura's also been very instrumental as well in kind of keeping the whole ball rolling on this, and the excitement level up as well. And as she did she invited us down there to go see the rest of the bones,
Yeah,
which
so
is kind of neat.
there are, in the collection, there are almost 600 bones, and there are maybe 25 or 30 that are here, and the rest of them are down in Madison. So if anyone's in Madison, let me know. You can see the rest of the big collection. So.
Great. Marlon, you want to come up and maybe just to tell us a little bit about this, because maybe your connection, or start with how this first, because it is you've already done one presentation for Polk County for the Historical Society a couple of years ago, but this, this is kind of the culmination. I think it would be interesting to hear how your take on it as well.
This is kind of a roundabout pathway for me. In 2004, my colleague Matt Hill, who's a professor of anthropology at Iowa State University, who's originally from Wisconsin, invited me to participate in research on the Interstate Park Bison site. And it turns out that we have a bunch of archival material from one of the excavators of that site. And so we started writing a book about it, which we still haven't finished yet, someday. But the knife site was always kind of the elephant in the room that we always kind of danced around, because as much as we learned, the more we learned about Interstate Park, we always kept coming back to Nye. Where's this site at? How old is it? How does it relate to this? And so eventually in 2009, and I can't remember exactly when, light bulb came on, and I said, I'll email the Polk County Historical Society. Maybe somebody there knows something. And so I emailed, and Daryl responded and said, I don't know much about Interstate Park, but I know where Nye was. Well, then a whole bunch of light bulbs came on, and I was on the phone with Matt and other people, and Daryl said, if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. He goes, I talked to somebody else down there one time, and the whole thing fell through, and so you got to promise me right now that you're going to stick with this clear to the end. And I said, okay, I promise that I will. And I'd like to think that I've fulfilled that obligation to Daryl, and very a privilege to do so. We went out there, as Eldred said, it was actually in June 2010. Daryl and Eldred and Dan Jose and Greg, we went back and relocated the site. Having the location for the site was really important to us, because now we had a place in the landscape where we could attach this collection. And at that point in time, none of us, except for my colleague Chris Widka, had ever really seen much of the collection. It was all in deep storage at the Bell Museum on the University of Minnesota campus. We weren't sure how we were going to study it, if it was even possible. And Daryl said, well, we're just going to get the collection back. And it's like, well, we found the site, so yeah, okay. And so he began corresponding and going over there and talking to people. And I don't want to say anything harsh about my colleagues across the river, but there used to be a vertebrate paleontologist there, and he passed away in the 1990s. And then, like a lot of museums, they kind of have shifted emphasis at this point in time, and so they no longer had a vertebrate paleontologist. They no longer had anybody on staff who was interested in this stuff, and so it was all just packed away into deep storage. And so they weren't terribly interested in it, and they weren't terribly interested in devoting manpower to trying to figure out where it was or to repackage it. And Laura was actually instrumental in going up there, and they gave her a key card and said, go find it, box it up, and get it out of here. and unfortunately, it took a lot longer than that. And then we were pleased that in February 2012, the collection finally was delivered by one of the staff at the Bell Museum to Matt Hill at Iowa State, so that he could begin analysis of it. And that was really important for a bunch of reasons. The main one, of course, for us was that Daryl was aware of that, and this was shortly before he passed away. So we were very pleased that he would, at least before he died, he knew that the collection was back in our hands, essentially. And as importantly, for the first time, it was going to be really thoroughly studied. My colleague Matt is one of the top bison people in the country, a zooarchaeologist, paleozoologist, if you want, working on bison. And he and his students went through it. We know age, structure, sex of the animals. We know how old they were. We know that now they're between 7,000 and 8,000 years old. We know how they got into the marsh. We know a lot more than we ever did. And actually, we have a long paper coming out in the Wisconsin Archaeologist in the fall, and I'll make sure that copies of that are available up here so that people can, can get those. We finally wrote this up, and that was what we really wanted to do, and Daryl really wanted to see that done too. And so we've answered a lot of questions, and there are still questions that we don't have the answers for. We don't know, there's about 1,000 bones still missing, and we don't know what happened to those. We think they probably just ended up being dumped in the trash at some point. There were supposed to have been caribou and elk bones. We don't know what happened to those. If they were actually there, nobody seems to know what happened to that material. I wouldn't be surprised if there were at least deer and elk, because we know that those were present in Interstate Park, a contemporary site 6 or 7 miles away. I guess that's pretty much the most of what I have to say. I would like to, Matt and Chris, my colleagues, who Matt was the one who kind of got this started, and then I did a lot of the archival historical research on it. And Chris came in and worked on radiocarbon dates and isotopic work, the molecular archaeology stuff that's pretty cutting edge. And they really wanted to be here. Matt's getting ready to go into the field, and Chris had other commitments at the Illinois State Museum, so they weren't able to come. And of course, I'd like to thank Laura for all the hard work that she put in on it, and Elizabeth Pilliard and Bill Reeder at the UW Zoology Museum were very critical early on in the project. And of course, Eldred wouldn't have been possible without Eldred. And when I hear him talking about it, it really does give me chills to find that connection. It's just so unusual to think that there's still a personal connection with the site. That is just really fantastic. Of course, Daryl for everything. Rosalie for all the help that she gave us. Greg for the wonderful press coverage. I came up yesterday and found myself on all the papers. Wow. I'm a lot more famous here than I am in Madison.
Remember that.
And Candace Elliott for putting together this really beautiful exhibit. Michelle Peterson and the Polk County Historical Society board for making it happen. And of course, Bill and Jean Denning, the landowners, for their fantastic hospitality. And the staff at the Bell Museum, whom I maybe defamed a little bit, but I didn't intend to do that. And then Senator Harsdorf and Brian Steves on the other side of the river for all of their help. And I guess that's really all I had to say. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer some of them.
Question, do you know or have a theory as to why the bones were at the Nye site?
I think that probably it was a watering hole, that it was, it wasn't so, it's right on the edge of Dwight Lake. The animals could have been coming down to the lake. This just happens to be where we're seeing them preserved. I mean, it could have been that there were bones in other places in the landscape, but we're seeing them preserved in these little bogs, where you have the right kind of soil pH, the water pH, and everything is being preserved very nicely there, like at Interstate Park. But I suspect it was probably just watering holes. And we know one of the things from the molecular archaeology that I mentioned earlier is that these were resident herds. These were herds that were actually living in this area 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. And we know that in the winter, the herds were breaking apart. Some of the herds were staying in the uplands, were grazing in the uplands, and some of them were moving into the bottoms near the water and were foraging there on probably grasses and forbs along the lakes and streams. And probably it's from that we start to get these animals, just natural mortality events, and a single animal dying here, maybe being mired, or we know that the animals were ranging from just a few months in age up to some really old ones that were 12, 15 years old, which is getting pretty old for a bison at that time. I mean, the teeth are worn down to pegs almost. So you have the whole age range. I guess maybe I answered that. I'm not quite sure if I did.
Well, and I think the exhibit said that, while it suggested the 1935 articles, that there had been killed by natives, that
Yeah.
you did not find any bones that
No.
substantiated that.
That's kind of part of the whole interesting backstory that really intrigued us a lot on this, is that the 1930s, it had only been in 1926-27 when they found what was considered at the time to be the absolute definitive proof that humans were killing extinct animals. This was at Folsom, New Mexico. And Albert E. Jenks was an anthropologist at the University of Minnesota, and he became really almost obsessed in his last 8 or 10 years at the university in what was then called early man, what we now call Paleo-Indian studies. And Jenks he brought to light a lot of really interesting, important sites, some of which were genuinely really early, maybe 8,000 to 10,000 years old. But he also was very, very exuberant in some of his claims, and sometimes he was saying things were a lot older than they were. In this case, the tools that they mentioned in the original article, we think were probably spirally fractured bone. When large carnivores were getting the bones, they were twisting them. They put their jaw on them and twist and break these bones open, and you tend to get these long splinters of bone. And Jenks and his colleagues were calling these daggers, and were suggesting that these were bone tools. And we know now from all the other sites like this that have been excavated across particularly the American West that you find these kind of tools wherever there are big carnivores in the landscape, and they aren't really tools at all, they're just broken shards of bone. There were supposed to have been stone tools at this site, but there's no catalog record at the University of Minnesota for them, and nobody knows where they're at. Nobody knows if they ever were even real or not. We don't know what they look like, there were no photographs.
Where are the Interstate Park bones?
The Interstate Park bones are almost all at the Milwaukee Public Museum.
Milwaukee Public Museum?
They have a few examples at the visitor.
Yeah, there is
visitor station.
one of the crania at the
The irony too, that, I mean, you talked about the lack of tools. So the rumor that there was a vice grip found in there is probably not true.
There could be now. They were fixing their machines, I don't know. You had a question over here.
Yeah, 35 years ago, I had a load of black dirt hauled in. I lived in, over by Andover, Minnesota, in the bunker bogs, and there was about 14 bison bones in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't get all
You know about
surprised.
that?
I don't know that particular one, no, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Took them over to that violin maker there who had the bog, and then they really started getting into it, but you don't know nothing about that, huh?
No, I don't know anything about that site. Yeah, I'd have to talk to some colleagues in Minnesota and try and find out about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
When black dirt and peat is excavated in this area, is it common to exhume bones of?
I don't know how common it is. We know Interstate Park and Nye were the same kind of context. They were getting down into marl and finding these either at that contact between the peat layers and the marl, or maybe even into the marl, which was favoring preservation of the bone. We know that when they had this marl operation going in the 1930s, it was paid for with New Deal money, Federal Emergency Relief Administration money. They were trying to extract as much marl as fast as they could to put it on the fields. There had just been a drought, and the alfalfa fields were not responding very well from that, and so they wanted to get marl and spread out across as many of the fields as they could. And so they used this money. We thought maybe one site was enough, I don't know. But we just think that they weren't finding them at the other 5. Are there any other questions?
How deep were the bones buried in this marl?
It's kind of hard to tell from what originally they published this in an article in the journal Science, one of the most prestigious science journals in the world still. And they said they were coming out between 10 and 18 feet below the surface. And unfortunately, it's kind of hard for them to tell. I don't know how they really knew that, because they were using what they called a homemade backhoe and a drag line, and they were pulling this stuff out. So this stuff was being churned as it came out. So all that they knew was that it was apparently coming out of this stratum that was about 8 or 10 feet thick, below a layer of peat. So they were coming out pretty deep.
What will happen to the other 475 or 500 bones that are at the university?
They'll
museum?
just remain in storage, and they're available to researchers who want to come. The UW Zoology Museum doesn't have real exhibit space. It has an enormous collection of vertebrate fauna from all over the country. In fact, actually one of the world's largest collection of Galapagos fauna, because one of the professors there goes to the Galapagos. The collection is really heavily used by archaeologists, by paleozoologists, others who come and look at various bones, not just bison, but mammoth, mastodon, all kinds of other animals.
Is it on campus? Or
It is on campus, yeah.
What was the apex predator during this period?
Humans. There were definitely people on the landscape when these. None of these show any evidence of having been killed by humans or being used by humans. But everything that we know anthropologically about large animals and landscapes, wherever it is on Earth, if there are humans around, they're going after those large animals.
What animal was the apex predator?
Well, it would have been humans. There would have also been wolves on the landscape too. There would have been wolves.
Other than humans.
So probably a lot of the carnivore breakage that we're suggesting was probably present was wolves that were breaking these bones up, and that's where you get these big bone splinters that were supposed to have been tools and things like that. So yeah.
Because there were bison herds around, does that say something about was it forested or open or?
It was more open than probably it is now. Unfortunately, the way that the Nye site and even Interstate Park were excavated, there isn't a lot that we can say about the ecology at the time. But the fact that we have bison here suggests that it was probably somewhat more open, more grassy than it is now.
Is there evidence, where are these other occidentalis bison bones found around the country?
There's a site called Anderson Mills in Illinois. That's the oldest dated Bison occidentalis. They're about 9,000 years old. There's part of an animal that was found near Sauk City down by Madison. I don't think we have an age on it, but it's probably between 5,000 and 9,000 years old. There's a big site in Minnesota called Itasca, where about the same time as Interstate Park, 1936-37, there was Minnesota excavated and found quite a few remains there. The most recent dated Bison occidentalis is from a site near Kenora in Ontario. That's about 45 to 5,000 years old. And then you get, of course, out west when you start to get into the big Paleo-Indian sites, you start to find them in the 5,000-6,000 year range. This is Nye and Interstate Park are probably, except for Big Bone Lick in Kentucky, these are the largest assemblages of Bison occidentalis east of the Mississippi River.
And why aren't they still roaming around the area?
Probably in part, some of it is just change in climate, change in the local environment, and some of it also was human predation. Particularly when Europeans came in and started using weapons on them. I think the last ones east of Mississippi were killed in about 1850. But they were definitely a prey species up until that time.
Those are bison.
Those are bison. After about 5,000 years, you get bison instead of occidentalis.
One thing, Marlon, can you, because it may be confusing, if you haven't seen the skull up there, the skull itself is maybe this wide. It's the base of the horns. What's the estimate on how wide those horns would have been?
It's kind of hard to say. They would have been with the sheaths on the horns. All we're seeing is the bony part, but there would have been a keratinous, like fingernail, like that covering that sheath that would have gone over it. So it would have been, they would have been definitely really large animals. They would have been very impressive. These big horns for display. They were definitely quite large. And Bison occidentalis are on average about 15% larger than bison, the modern bison are. So they were really big animals.
So is there DNA available that we could clone them back again?
That's interesting. There is a lot of work now on bison DNA. It's really in the last 3 or 4 years, the work on bison, ancient DNA from bison bones has really turned over a lot of the earlier thinking on bison taxonomy and bison movements in North America. So everything's kind of in flux right now. But yeah, I don't know if they'll eventually ever get to cloning, but it's an interesting thought. And I think at some point in time, somebody will go back to these and start to look at them for DNA as well. It's one of the things that we haven't done, but they're certainly available for that. And there's almost certainly viable DNA in them. Yeah.
Were the glaciers pretty close when these bison were roaming around there? Or?
By this time, the glaciers would have retreated well back up into Canada. This was after the ice sheets here began to melt out, recede back by 10,000, 9,000, 10,000 years ago. So this area would have been probably, there would have been, you would have gone through a succession of spruce forest, and then at this time when these animals were here, 9,000 or 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, it would have been starting to become a little bit more open, bits of prairie, with some trees. It would have been a little different than you see now. But are there any other questions?
Well, I wanted to have Senator Harsdorf speak for a second, because one of the real issues along the way, besides the research and finding the story, was bringing those bones back to Wisconsin. And there was not a whole lot of precedent, really, at that point, it seemed.
No.
And it was unclear, but I don't know, if you want to say a little bit, and then Laura also, because you were one of those who was kind of first let in and kind of turned loose in the museum, but I did want Senator Harsdorf back there, because you were instrumental as well in making this happen and bringing it around. And I want people to know that, but I also, it's kind of an interesting little tale as well, because you kind of had to pull some strings.
I'll preface it just for Daryl tried multiple times. He used basically all the polite means possible to get the bones back, asking nicely and sending lots of emails and phone calls. And then I think it was in October 2010, or I think it was 2000. It was October 2011. He finally just decided that he'd had enough, and so we did what we used to call jokingly the nuclear option. That was, I think, I'll let her talk about that.
You would have to let him say that. Thanks, Marlon, for that. It was October of 2010, and I want to thank you for keeping your promise, first of all. What this shows, what you've heard, is how many people it takes to be successful in a project like this. But clearly, without a doubt, it was Daryl who started the ball rolling. And it was in October 2010 that he called and talked to me. And it was about a year later that we met, Rosalie and Daryl and I, over lunch in the cafe on Highway 8. And I took notes. And that's when, he said that they're over in the Bell Museum and we can't get them. And so I had a personal friend at the time who was serving on the Board of Regents over at the University of Minnesota, and so I called them, and I personally think that individual was very helpful in seeing to it that what needed to be done was done in order to release them. But Daryl was a personal friend of mine. He was passionate about this. I can tell you, you've already heard, he was passionate about bringing these historic bison bones back to Polk County, where they originated. From the Nye area, and he was, as Marlon already noted, and Greg, he was persistent, and that's why he got things done. And I just, before I came here, I looked on his, he had a blog, and he called himself the old local historian, covering the life in the St. Croix Valley, River Valley, and he truly was. History meant so much to him, and I think obviously by you being here today, you recognize the importance and the value of history too. But it was his passion, it was really his passion, that, along with all the others, but it was his passion that drove this. And today, Daryl is smiling down. And to us, we say to Daryl, you got her done. So thank you for all doing, thanks for being here, and too bad Daryl's late.
I know you didn't have a lot prepared, but Laura, I just wanted to say, how tough was it to find those bones?
They actually were in a pretty good state of housing there and a good state of preservation. So they were boxed in their paleontology area. And